What time does the 7 o'clock meeting start?
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock. Thank you. Thanks for joining Position of Neutrality. Those of you joining us online and those of you here in the room, thank you very much for being here to share the Spirit with us. We open every session of Position of Neutrality with a prayer, and Wayne is in the house tonight to do that for us.
Hello, everybody. Heavenly Father, thank you for this time that we could spend together. Thank you for the word. Lord, may we go out into the world and proclaim your name and proclaim the good news that is you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Wayne. So those of you that are joining us for the first time, what we do here, we've been doing for lots of years. We take a look at the suggested instruction for a step or so a week directly out of this book. And we use this book in 12-step recovery walk.
It works.
Yeah, the process described by the authors of this book's been proven to work for addicts of the hopeless variety, addicts to alcohol and other substances. And as time has gone on, it also is very effective with other behavioral disorders. And so whoever's tuning into us for whatever reason, welcome to our session. Welcome to our home. Tonight, we're going to take a look at step 4, which a lot of people fear. And I think they say they fear it because they fear something that comes after it and not the inventory itself. So we're going to look at the author's experience of the step 4 inventory and then talk a little bit about maybe some myths and misconceptions around step 4, why one would want to get through that quickly, that type of thing. Huh? Fair enough?
Fair enough.
So we're on page 63 of the book. The book is entitled Alcoholics Anonymous, the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. It's called the Big Book in a lot of circles, and so people don't know that it actually has a title, and the title is descriptive of the authors and what it's about. It's the testimony of the first several thousand members of 12-step recovery fellowships, yes, with their experience with the manner of living described in the steps. So we're on page 63, the bottom of the page, and they said, next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action. So the first thing I would call to your attention is, do you know who the we is?
100.
The first 100. So if you'd had less than a launching experience on your attempt at a 4th step, you might want to consider what propelled their launch that you were lacking. Does it make sense? Because you can't move into this conscious relation without examining with your logical senses why you want to move into it. Does it make sense? So someone has to take the mystery out of it for you to some degree, at least the reason why, not necessarily the experience, which is going to be individual. Yeah? Then it says the first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted. Though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. So blocking us from what? Yeah, they said that the fundamental idea of God was found deep down in every man, woman, and child, but it may be obscured by calamity, pomp, and worship. So if lack of power is my dilemma, then I need to find things that are blocking my access to power from within me. Yes? Okay. So then it says our liquor was but a symptom. I think a lot of people suspect that in the throes of addiction. How many of you in your addiction, whatever it was, suspected that your main problem really wasn't the drugs, the alcohol, the sex, the whatever it was, that there was something else that drove it? Yeah, because all I used liquor for was to provide the spiritual experience I needed to escape the current reality I was in. So it says, so we had to get down to causes and conditions. And I learned that because I tried abstinence and it didn't work for the likes of me. It may work for some. I hear people talk like it works, but I've never seen it effectively work where people actually are able to live a life comfortable and joyful and purposeful when they're not serving something larger than themselves. So therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. So they call our attention to our proclivity to take inventory of others and then blame my suffering on that which I see or hear. And there's no relief from that suffering, right? So the idea is I need to get the stuff out from within that's causing the storm within. Does that make sense? So a business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and a fact-facing process. It's an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. So we're going to go back now and unpack that paragraph. First thing they said is that this is a fact-finding and a fact-facing process. How many of you have found the fact and did not face it? Of course I use like this. I'm an addict. Where's the plug? Right? So the reality is I lack the power. I could face but not, right? I could discover the truth about me, but I couldn't do anything about it. Lack of power. Okay. And then it says that it's an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. Notice what they said, the truth. Not my truth, not your truth, the truth. Does that make sense? Because my truth and your truth may differ. In fact, they're certain to. Yes? But the truth simply is unwavering. Yes? All right. So then it says one object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. So how many of you discovered some things about yourself, but you can't honestly say that you got rid of them promptly? Or so they're telling us something about the process. As these things are identified, then we'll seek power to overcome, and as we move forward in service, more and more that'll go away. Yes. It doesn't have anything to do with me. I just need to identify it and then seek power to overcome it. Yeah. All right. So if the owner of the business be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways is what had defeated it, we considered its common manifestation. So they said being convinced. When did they ask us if we were convinced? That was the essence of the step 3 decision, right? Any life run on self-will could hardly be a success. And therefore, we started on the decision, yes? The first step of that decision is to see, it's not enough to say, I know that's what happened. Self-will has caused my defeat, but I need to know how my self-will manifests that gets in the way of where I want to be, right? So it's personal to me. How am I going to have a personal relationship with a creator if I don't know which part of me is me and which part of me is creator? Does that make sense? All right. So then it says resentment is the number one offender. So how many of you have heard that, read about that, still cling to your own favorite resentments because, why not? So I think we need to internalize that the sooner we break free from our explanation of our self to feel aggrieved, the sooner we're truly free. Because we tether ourselves to unpleasant events by holding on to grievance. So then it says it destroys more alcoholics than anything else. You might be an alcoholic or an addict of the hopeless variety. If you are, then this is even more grave than just a regular human. Does that make sense? So from it stem all forms of spiritual disease, for we've not only been mentally and physically ill, we've been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. I think that's important for people to understand, because I hear people talking about all kinds of treatment methods, which over 90 years have produced lesser results, not greater results. And as somebody who's been a player in the behavioral health field and has derived an income from the behavioral health model, I must tell you, our outcomes without a spiritual component are insignificant. I won't say they're ineffective, but they're insignificant. So there's got to be a spiritual component, hence a faith-based lane, a bigger community, a 12-step lane, a bigger community, something where you can actually pour into your brother and sister, because that's where the power is found. So then it says, in dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. Well, that would be new behavior, wouldn't it? How do we normally deal with resentments? Yeah, we'll spin in it, right? Go from thought to emotion to, I can't do this, and then go right back into it. Or we'll share it with others. How many of you say, I just got to get out of this, and then you get someone on the phone and you pour right back into it? Yeah. So we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we are angry. So that's a simple list, yes? And then it says we ask ourselves why we are angry. So with everyone, why am I angry at this person, this institution, this principle? Yeah? In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore, we were burned up. So when they talk about being burned up, they're talking about that boiling rage that some of us know so well, walking around. Just any one of you say one thing, and I'll show you how angry I am. Right? A lot of us come to recovery that way. Right? Don't talk to me. Right? And we need to recognize in the spirit that's what's going on, because what they're really saying is, somebody comfort me.
Absolutely.
Anyway, on our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relations which have been interfered with? Notice how they're all thoughts. Those are all thoughts trying to compete with me for what my identity is. My self-esteem is that how I'd like to think about me, yes? Or how I think you think about me. But enough of me talking about me. What do you think about me? Because we're kind of wired that way, right? And then it gets pretty. Our security is when we feel like our livelihood or our support system is tied to people, institutions, or principles. Many of us in this room and our audience have lost their liberty. So what losing the security of freedom and independence is, and what it means, and its real consequences. Yes, and it really can mess with you about your identity. Right? And then our ambitions, that's a little trickier for humans. That's my hope for a future outcome. So I don't have to have anything real to hope for something real and think you're interfering with my options. And then I can get really mad at you for getting in the way of something I never had. Yeah, and then I can't even celebrate you for the victories you're having, right? So and then personal and sex relations, we'll get into that, but that's, you kind of get that, right? All right, so I'm going to go to the bottom of the page. It says, we went back through our lives, nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. Why did they remind us of that?
Because I'm going to search for the truth.
Yeah, and it's my story, right? It's my discovery of the Creator within. At some point, we may not be there yet, or you right? But why would I do anything less than thorough and honest when I'm trying to get a better outcome for me and for whoever else is dependent on me, right? So when we were finished, we considered it carefully. Why would I want to do that?
I wanted to make sure I'm thorough, and I consider it carefully, because it's life-changing, life-altering.
Yeah.
And I'm in here to alter my life from what it was in this disease.
Very good.
Crippled me.
Yeah. Good stuff. All right. So the first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. How many of you had that discovery? So that's not a unique discovery, right? And the other thing we're going to learn about how easy it is to find people who are wrong is that you can be right from two completely different perspectives. So it's not always as useful to argue your point because you don't know their perspective, right? We don't seem to understand. There's all the old cliche stuff that, what's normal to the spider is chaos to the fly, right? So we're just trying to look at some real truth here from a different perspective. Both sides could be a true observation. Yeah. All right. So to conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Have you ever had that happen? Started out on the day, maybe the week, maybe the month, and everyone you ran into was a reminder of the pain you're going through.
Yes.
All right. So sometimes it was remorse and then we were sore at ourselves. Have you ever felt bad for something and then just went into avoidance mode? So now the one thing I desperately need is to make my life about something bigger than me, and I'm retrenched in me. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. The seemed is in italics in this book. So have you noticed that sometimes you think you won an argument, but you lost a friend? So you can understand how that would, okay, what did I win here? And what was it about anyway? Yeah. So our moments of triumph were short-lived. It's plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. Now, they say it's plain. Remember, they're on the other side of the experience. If you're new and you're sitting down for your first time at an effort at this, it may not be so plain. That's when somebody that has the experience will tell you, what happened, why I had my deep resentments, what happened to me while I held them, and what happened to me when I got unburdened from them. So that you can at least have some living example sitting there with you. That's why we have mentorship, sponsorship. That's the whole point, is not to tell you your experience, but to help you unpack your experience in light of mine. Does it make sense? So to the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile? So they told you something key that they discovered in their process. What did they tell you? We didn't even know all the meanings of powerlessness. I was powerless to know that I was permitting them, right? It was delusion. I didn't know I permitted the suffering I desperately screamed to get out of. I invited these demons into me over and over and over again. So, but with the alcoholic, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. So if you found yourself to be alcoholic, to be addict of the hopeless variety, it's worse than with the normal average human being, whatever a normal average human being is. But my hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience because it's an improved consciousness of that power within me. It's power, peace, happiness, sense of direction flowing into me. It gives me power, it gives me purpose, it gives me peace, it gives me joy. I don't look for those things in the world because those things in the world are fleeting. Does that make sense? So we found that it's fatal for when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns and we drink again. With us, to drink is to die. So how many of you had some clean time, found yourself just kind of annoyed or angry or restless, irritable, and discontented, and instead decided to go back to some old behaviors instead of, whatever, and then found yourself outside of the box again? So they're not kidding, right? I mean, abstinence is not going to work for me. And control is an illusion. The persistence of the illusion is astonishing. Many of us pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. It's the idea of control. I'm not so much an alcohol addict as I'm a control addict. And so the only thing that's going to solve that control addiction is a little substance called faith. Perhaps you've heard about it. Which means I got to keep going in and moving through the process. Yes? All right, so it says if we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. So they're talking a little bit about how we seed our anger, grouch and brainstorm. And then they may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison. Notice how they didn't even give normal men the credit for luxury. They said a dubious luxury. Because the likelihood is you're suffering in it just like me. You just don't medicate yourself to death like me. Does that make sense? So we turn back to the list, for it held the key to the future. So what does the list hold if within it is the key to the future? The truth.
Stock and trade.
And what do they tell us we were going to find in the final analysis? It's only there that he may be found, deep down what's inside us, right? Power, peace, happiness, sense of direction. Only there that he may be found, deep down within us, right? It's identity, folks. What we lost out there in our addiction and in our criminology and in all our other things that we got involved in, what we lost was our identity. And then the state participated in it by putting labels on us. So then we were in labels that were not of divine origin. And I don't care if you're sitting in recovery fellowships and you don't know this, or you're sitting in a prison and you don't know this. As soon as you do know this, you're no longer in bondage. Right? And this is why we need to restore identities regardless of circumstance. Yeah. So we turn back to the list, for it held the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had the power to actually kill. How could we escape? So consider how much of the wrongdoing of others toward us is fancy and how much is real. Because the vast majority people wrong us, but not with the intentionality we assume. There's probably not nearly as big a conspiracy against little old us as we sometimes imagine. There's a lot going on in the world that I'm unaware of, and I'm aware of a certain amount. And I can't possibly manage all of it, but in my mind and in my disorder, I can think I'm managing it, and I'll see threats from everybody. Yeah. So said, how could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? So those would be the questions. Yes. You want to get to the point you're reading this book like they're talking to you. That's what I had to master. How about you? Okay. And it says, we could not wish them away any more than alcohol. So they told you a clue what the very first thing they tried was. What did they try? Tried to wish them away. How many of you have tried to wish away your resentment? Or declare it away, right? I'm not mad at anyone. I forgive, but I don't forget. We got all kinds of cliches around it, but it means I'm not free of it. Because, see, the reality is they did all of that to a dead man. And I'm so free that I don't even care what you did to this dead man. Because it perfected me. Does that make sense? But that's the goal, right? All right, so this was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Now, for those of you who are still grasping with the idea that you're spiritually sick, we get you. Keep moving. It'll be all right, right? If you've been killing yourself with spirits, then the likelihood is you're spiritually sick. So, though we did not like their symptoms and the way these disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. So now I'm finding common ground with the sick man and the well man. Their symptoms are probably very much like mine. Selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, fear. Yes? Yeah. So it says we ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. So I'm asking for that power that we call God, right? To help me show them. So fix my vision and my actions to show them what tolerance, pity, and patience look like. so that maybe I can be that example for them. Yes? What are we most used to in active addiction? Judgment. We're almost numb to it because we're so burdened with it ourselves, right? But an active example of somebody who is accepting and empathetic and patient and tolerant with me, that's got my attention. Make sense? Okay. So when a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? That's your first steps of learning a prayer life for those of you that don't understand how simple prayer is. Because I'm not asking me, I'm asking the power in me. Does it make sense? They led it with, we ask God, now we say to ourselves, where's the power found? Deep down inside. So he's co-residing with the Creator, the power I'm talking to. All right, so God saved me from being angry. Thy will be done. I can't get past anger on my own, but through this power, I will encounter power that allow me to be kinder than I feel like being, to be tolerant in the face of difficult personalities. Yes? All right, so, and remember, all of us are difficult personalities, right? I mean, so on any given day, it's someone else's turn to tolerate you. So, get a grip. So we avoid retaliation or argument. Don't buy into the trap, guys. Have you ever been in that conversation where you really didn't want to go there, but you just had to chime in one more time, and all of a sudden you're in it again? That's what it means to avoid retaliation or argument. Just let it go. You know how quick conversations die when you're not participating? Like right away, especially if you walk away and quit reading it if you're doing it online. So we wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will. Power will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. That's going to require that I'm growing in prayer and meditation, that I'm paying attention to what's going on, that I'm not blaming outwardly for what's going on within me. Yes? But each and every one will give me the spiritual awakening I seek in 12 if I'll just take the right attitude and power in with me. Make sense? So referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely looked for our own mistakes. Now they use the word resolutely. What's that mean? Well, because I think a lot of us get on the other side of this process and we forget how hard it is to really find our part in some of the things we're deeply personally affected by. So we've got some counselors in this room that make a profession out of helping people find their trauma and then, walk through it with some dignity. We're supposed to do that even though we're not clinically trained as peers. We're supposed to help them walk through it with some dignity, not accusing, but, trying to find, number one, you got to identify the hurt, and then we've got to identify what the healing may be required, and we got to get you to participate in it. And you're not going to do that if I'm just laying a bunch of crap on you. Make sense?
Yes.
So where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? So now I'm looking at my thinking, yes? Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. So they're not going to be able to do that with some people. I'm going to have to show them some examples from my own life. And then they'll see it. And sometimes what I do with guys, I just did it last weekend, I don't know precisely the nature of the relationship they're in a problem with. So I throw up some scenarios, but not as the answer for them. Could it be? Could it be? Right? And I had a guy, and it wasn't all the things I said. And then as he described it to me, I go, oh, I get it. You like to be perceived as the guy who just gives of himself till it hurts, and then want to be mad at him for not receiving it with the grace that you wanted him to. And he goes, that's it. Okay, well, I relate to that. So anyway, where were we to blame? I got to find my part, because the access to power I need is going to be me understanding the part I played and what played out, yes? And so the inventory was ours, not the other man's. When we saw our faults, we listed them. For those of you who've never done this, came from a really difficult background, and perhaps even as an adult were badly mistreated, no one is suggesting you had a part in the mistreatment. Mistreatment is mistreatment. What I am saying is if you're on the other side of it and in a position to heal, then unforgiveness is tethering you to the pain. So if we can get you to at least a servant status, then the meaning will change in your mind and the forgiveness will come. Does it make sense? All right, so we placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly, and we're willing to set these matters straight. So they told you exactly how it unfolded for them. Now, most of us were not willing to set certain matters straight right away. So we had to go out and set other matters straight. And then as we grew in the Spirit, we were ready to set right other matters, right? So that says, notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the why. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our life. Have you noticed, or did you know, that fear touches every aspect of your life? I don't care how spiritually enlightened you think you are. The more spiritually enlightened you are, the more carefully you have to guard against fear and its manifestation. Because I consider myself relatively spiritual, and I'll get roped up in it because my help does not come from anything human. And I know this to my core, but I'll get damn mad at the human instruments that look like they're in the way. And that's just a fear response. So it was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did we not ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. So you just ask yourself, that if you haven't ever done any fear work, you should, just to see all the ways fear paralyzes you that you didn't associate with fear, right? But if in fear, I gave a false impression to you of who I was, and then as I let down my guard, I started being more like me, and you didn't like that version of me, who did that? Because most of us have done that kind of stuff. Not knowingly, but we've done it. I wanted you to like me, so I gave you a false impression of who I was, and then when I got comfortable, I started acting like who I really was, and then you didn't like that guy. And maybe you entrusted me with something you ought not have entrusted a guy like me with, and we had a real bad outcome, right? So anyway, you're getting my drift. Laughter tells me you're getting the drift. So we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper even though we had no resentment in connection with them. So there are fears that have driven me all my life that have no particular outward thing that I can remember. I'm not tethered to an event with this fear. But for me, one I like to always bring up is I had a fear that I was going to miss something. And I didn't think of all the ways that manifested. But as a drinker, I would sit in a bar, deathly sick, walk outside, vomit, come back, order another drink. And I would sit there so sick, just me and the bartender, deathly afraid that if I left, I'd miss something. Surely that one would walk in right then or whatever. The party would get started. Or I sat in a trap house for days on end because, who knows what might happen, right? And in more normal outcomes, being unfaithful in relationships that I wanted to be intimate relationships or just never fully committing to them because, what if something better comes? Right? So, and it drives in all these weird ways. And we don't like to think of ourselves as that person, but that's what we become when fear drives us. So anyway, we ask ourselves why we had them. So that'd be the question. Why do I have this fear that I'm going to miss something? Have I ever missed anything? Usually only the things fear blinded me to. I mean, I missed opportunities because I mistook them for work. That kind of thing. None of you did that? Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? How many of you committed to something and went all in and then eventually burn out? So that's what self-reliance failing me eventually wrought. Self-reliance is good as far as it went. Yep, I was gangbusters there for a minute. Yeah, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. So they're talking about everything centers around these fear manifestations, right? Manifestations of self-driven by fear. So perhaps there's a better way. So now we're going to start talking about the good news. Yeah? Those of you in that other book, this is the good news, right? All right. So for we're now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We're going to trust and rely upon power, but not my power. The power found within me that I'm now trying to improve consciousness of. Yes? Self-reliance failed me. Now I'm accessing power greater than me in the one place I hadn't looked within me. Does that make sense? It says, we trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We're in the world to play the role he assigns. So how many of you would have to admit that it does seem at times you've been given rather cruddy assignment? So all of us at times in the human experience are going to feel like the assignment, the cross we've been given to bear, is excessive. However, no one on this planet is better than you to play out the role that you've been assigned than you, properly armed with the facts about you. And we are this infinitely diverse community of humans making up a divine being, and all of our contributions should be welcomed, but we lock them away from the community by our manifestations of self. So we're going to get free of all that so we can be authentic. So we're free to be us. Free of us, so we're free to be us. Yes? So just to the extent that we do as we think he would have us and humbly rely on him, does he enable us to match calamity with serenity? How many of you have to admit that you actually thrived on calamity? So that's not that unusual, even in addiction, where a lot of us were adrenaline junkies. A lot of people didn't have addiction to just chemicals. We had addiction to adrenaline and all the things that could bring that about. And we did dangerous things. And yes, right? So I'm already good in that environment, but I didn't find serenity that was lasting. Now I don't have to go looking for those things if I know I've got that power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction from within. I simply need to serve and seek. Yes? All right. So we never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. Why?
That's the way we live.
I mean, his power, his love, his way of life. I didn't make up any of this.
No.
Not even the me part. We can laugh at those who think spirituality the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it's the way of strength. I laugh at the idea that you think being spiritual is weak, when I know how much power I have and how much access I have to power greater than me when I'm walking in the Spirit.
No longer obscure.
Mm-hmm. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. And we're not talking about bravado. We're talking about certainty. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let him demonstrate through us what he can do. We ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be at once we commence to outgrow fear. So the reason you want that fear list and you want the resentment list that's chased down to the fear is so you know exactly how you were thinking and acting. So if you're doing it on a workbook type thing, don't just check boxes. You need to know personally, how do you think and how do you act when you experience that fear? because you want to see what your manifestation of self looks like. That's what you're going to need to start praying yourself out of, because if you could change it, you wouldn't have ended up here in 12-step recovery. But there's a power in you that can change it to the precise extent that we permit. And I permit this power to change me when I'm focused on trying to help you. I don't permit this power to change me for whatever reason when I think he's doing it wrong and I know exactly how I want it done. So now about sex. Uh-oh, Wayne's hitting the doors. Many of us needed an overhauling there. But above all, we tried to be sensible on this question. It's so easy to get way off the track. Here, we find human opinions running to extremes, absurd extremes, perhaps. One set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature, a base necessity of procreation. So that would be somebody who's talking to you about abstinence only, no matter what, maybe, solitude forever, whatever, right? Procreation only, everything else, even thinking about it is a sin. Most of us humans know that's not going to work for us. If we're honest about our human condition, yes. They wouldn't have put in that other book, if your eye causes you to sin, tear it out. Right? Because I don't have to act bad to think bad. And I don't mean bad as a judgment. I mean bad as in not helpful to others. Make sense? So then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we don't have enough of it or that it isn't the right kind. They see its significance everywhere. So that's the other side. That's the destructive side where now my addiction is to matters of the flesh and they happen to involve other humans, and I probably am doing some transactional stuff and not fully disclosing the part they're getting, right? Well, it's hard to operate in that world if you tell them the whole truth, nothing but the truth, right? Yes? No? Have you ever been in intimate relationships where you didn't disclose that you weren't as available as, for whatever reason, as... I'm going to have to check with my wife. She's not really all that understanding. Anyway, you get me. Or you're just, so caught up in it that you're ignoring things, right? So we're trying to get some balance. Yeah. Any of you find out in your workplace you have both males and females? Have you discovered that if you think whatever your particular flavor is a target, no matter what environment you find them in, that it gets you in trouble? How many of you in recovery rooms have had that discovery? Yeah, because everybody there is really trying to get well. And so anyway, so it says they see its significance everywhere. One school would allow man no flavor for his fare. The other would have us all on a straight pepper diet. We've all acknowledged having maybe both senses. And then it says, we want to stay out of this controversy. So who's the we? The first 100 and us too, if we want to follow their path. I don't want to get caught up in those judgments. Does that make sense? We do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. Now notice that it says we don't want to be. You're going to find it. You're going to need power greater than you for all kinds of human interactions. And that's another one. Okay? And said, we all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them? So one thing I sure can't do anything about is yours. So I can take like 6.9 billion people off the list, right? Whatever the accurate count is. Because if there's one person that I can do anything about in that area, it's probably me. Even my spouse, I can't do anything about theirs. Truth be told. Yes? So what can we do about them? Well, what can I do about them? I admitted I was powerless. And one, did I gain access to power?
Yes.
Yes, I did. But I'm going to first know what's me and what's the power and what's my motive. Yes? So the purpose of this is to get to my motives, see how myself manifests when I'm driven by fear. Yes? I point this out as we go through this next couple pages. I don't know why anyone, no matter who they are or what they do, if they've never seen an addictive disorder at all, wouldn't want to do this, because by the time you're done, you have a sane and sound ideal for all your future relationships. And then if you want to access power to actually move in sane and sound ideals, that'd be cool. We'd probably all get along better as a world. So we reviewed our own conduct over the years past. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? So a lot of times with your inventory, that's where you want to start. Get your list of relationships, give everybody a page, and go down and look at how you think and how you act when you're acting selfish, when you're acting dishonest, when you're being inconsiderate. Dishonesty outward is a given when you're in mental illness. We're not talking about outward dishonesty. We're talking about inward dishonesty. What lie did I tell me that allowed me to treat you that way? Does it make sense? All right. Did we unjustifiably arouse? Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? And you might want to ask, are there any justifiable reasons to arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? And I don't know. But did I, through my actions? I think one of the things I did unjustifiably arousing it is if I wanted a relationship to end and I didn't want to be the guy that ended it, I was going to make it really fucking tough for them to stay with me.
Absolutely.
Then they could walk out and I could be the victim one more time. I don't know if any of you relate to what I'm talking about. But so where were we at fault? What could we have done instead? The importance of where was I at fault and what could I have done instead is to find out that deep down inside I knew. Because now there's hope. There's something written on my heart that knows that I should be better than I'm presenting. Does that make sense? So then we got this all down on paper and looked at it. And this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. So I usually ask at this point, how many of you want a future sex life? And like 2 of you are brave enough to say you do, and the rest of you all sit there and lie about it, because probably all of us want a future sex life. But more importantly, what we definitely want is a sane and sound ideal for all our future interactions with humanity, which is what this really is about. Yeah. So we subjected each relationship to each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? How many of you could spin whether something was selfish? So this is when you're going to find out from the power greater than you that you really are going to have to run things by this power within you, because we are really good at spinning it to how we're benefiting this lucky individual. And remember, this is people, institutions, or principles. So, I can get really spun up in an employer that really doesn't know me, who didn't choose me, because I know what a gift I would have been to them. Anyway, we ask God to mold our ideals to help us live up to them. Notice how they're asking for in all their affairs now. Mold my ideas and then help me live up to them. We forget that sometimes, right? And it says, we remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised and loathed. Whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. Now, I caution you, there's people that will teach you this is some kind of 10 Commandments type stuff. It's really not, but it's a lot like the 10 Commandments in that this isn't a book that I'm going to be able to fulfill all their suggestions perfectly, but it will make me aware of how imperfect I am so that I'll seek the power. And if you're reading this book and you're experiencing it for the first time, you're going to find a lot of people who claim it don't do what it says. Just don't be that guy. This book's not written for them. This book's written for people like me, because if I'll do what it says, it won't matter to me what they say. So does that make sense? So it says, we must be willing to make amends where we've done harm. Why? Same reason. Not must thou shalt, must because I want to grow. It's a no-brainer. Why do I go to the gym? Because I want to maybe trim down a little and get a better lifestyle, right? It isn't thou shalt, it's I must be willing to do this, yes? And then it says, provided we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. So don't get so caught up on the sex part. That's just a common human frailty. But all these other things that go on with us, all our human relations, all our interactions with the world. My relationship with Creator is my relationship with creation. If my relationship in creation is not full of power, peace, and happiness, then check it out with Creator. See what's up. See? So, in other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. So, guys, if you're turning your head now because of that word, we ask the power within us what I should do about each specific matter and then respond on my paper. In this way, you're going to find that prayer works and you are in communication. I mean, the whole process is to let you know we're not talking about groups of drunks, doorknobs, light bulbs, silly power within that's better than I am now and wants more for me. And I'm proving it to me because I won't go back if I don't know it's real. Same reason I went back to cocaine. It was real. No one had to convince me. Anyone else have some cocaine friends in here? Yeah. 3 of them ran to the bathroom while I said that. God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsel with other persons is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. Don't go out and take a poll shopping for your opinion amongst your fellows. Because if you are going to go back in meditation, that's your final move. And you may find, I know a couple of years ago, we had a dog kill one of Denise's dogs, and every person she talked to, just for comfort, told her you should be angry, have that dog destroyed, have that woman strung up on the yard arm, And she said, I don't want to be angry. I feel awful for that poor woman. I know how terrible she felt watching her dog destroy my dog. The whole committee had the wrong idea. Who was Christ-like? Denise was Christ-like. Yeah. Right? And so because it's unfamiliar doesn't mean it's wrong. So check it with the Spirit. Once you felt that, so you know that it's just not me talking to you. So we realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice. Suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. How many of you are perfectionists? Don't want to try anything just in case I don't finish it or don't finish it the way I thought I would. Okay. Does this mean we're going to get drunk? If I don't do recovery perfectly, am I going to relapse into an active addiction disorder? So some people tell us so, but it's only a half truth. It depends on us and our motives. If we're sorry for what we've done and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and will have learned our lesson. If we're not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we're quite sure to drink. We're not theorizing. These are facts out of our experience. The importance of a peer model. I can say that to somebody because I've seen it happen to hundreds of people and I've seen it happen in my own life. If I'm going to continue to do these things just lacking empathy and just out of just complete desire to fulfill some desire of mine, I'm going to cause harm, and eventually I'm going to put myself in a situation where none of it's sustainable. That's just a fact. And a peer can say that because we've all been there. We've been on the other side of it. It's harder for counselors to say that to us. It's harder for lawyers to say that to us. Right? Because we just ain't hearing it. All right, so to sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal. Earnestly pray for the right ideal. How many of you understand why earnest prayer would be needed to get the right ideal?
Absolutely. God doesn't care about prayers you don't care about.
Yeah, if you're not really seeking to enlighten you, then you're not going to have any more than your own ideations. Right? So it says, so for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity and for strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. Guys, if you're so paralyzed because you desperately want an expression of sexual energy, then the only thing they could suggest was just go help your brother, go help your sister, let that idea go, let God work on that issue, right? And you just go help people through theirs and see what happens. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious urge when to yield would mean heartache. How many of you have relapsed into bad behavior because you wouldn't let go of an obsession? And it may not even be addictive stuff, but just bad behavior. Okay. So if we've been thorough about our personal inventory, we have written down a lot. Yes? We've listed and analyzed our resentments, so they're telling you precisely what the product is. Yes? And we've begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality. It's a process, right? So as I go out and prosecute my amends, as I go out and try and deliver this message to other people, and I grow through prayer and meditation, more and more of my old ideas will be presented to me in those encounters, yes? And so then I'll start to outgrow these fears that I've identified back here, right? I'll see how my past can benefit others. This is setting me up for those 9-step promises. Everyone's, I'm getting the promises. I got a new car. No. I mean, I'm glad you got a new car, but that is not the promises. Yeah, they would have said freedom from pedestrianism, bus routes. All right, so we've begun to learn tolerance, patience, goodwill toward all men, even our enemies, for we look upon them as sick people. Right? So the idea is have no enemies. Right? We've got to get to a place where we're distributors of that which we would have. Yes? All right, so we have listed people we have hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. So they're telling me about my new mindset, the revolution. I'm willing to straighten out the past if I can. And in this book, you read again and again that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. What did it? Faith. Guys, if you're new in fellowships and you keep hearing about what people do today to stay sober, faith that I can have a life better than I have had, based on the manner of living suggested in this book, is what will give you a crack at maybe staying sober, but more importantly, having a reason to. Because you won't stay sober until you find a reason to. And my guess is that once you find a reason to, you won't have any difficulty with the other. Because abstinence is a byproduct of growing in the Spirit. Right? There's another book that tells us that John, the guy that went out and baptized everybody in the river, he was never to taste alcohol because he was going to be filled with the Holy Spirit. So he lived inebriated in the Spirit. Otherwise, he couldn't have run around in camel hair jackets eating bugs. I only could do that on meth. Anyway. Yeah, you too. Yeah. We hope you're convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from him. So if you're not convinced now, keep taking the actions. That's the whole point, yeah? And then it says if you've already made a decision and an inventory of your grosser handicaps, you've made a good beginning. So the question of the ages is, do you do more than one inventory? Yes, you do your inventory, your thoughts all day as you go along for a lifetime. May you have to go back to a paper and do it again with somebody else? Yep, probably will. Most people who have stuck around a long time have done this lots of different ways with lots of different people for the very benefit of growing into a better person from where I am standing currently. Yeah? And then it says that being so, you've swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. So there's the truth about me, and there's the truth about you, and then there's the truth, that power within me. And as I grow in the truth about me versus the truth in me, I learn that I get progressively free. Make sense? Yeah. All right, next week we're in 5, 6, and 7. Thanks.